Hey friend, do you want to offer meaningful learning solutions that create behavior change, fit in the flow of work, and yield real results for your nonprofit? If yes, this is the podcast for you. Join me as I explore instructional design and leadership development best practices, as well as change management, belonging, and influence. If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I've been in your shoes. I'm a learning and development consultant and founder of Skill Masters Market. Before starting my business, I led learning and leadership development initiatives for a large national nonprofit. I know what it's like to need to develop your staff quickly and effectively and to build the relationships and cut through the organizational layers to be successful. And I'm bringing all of that to you in this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's learning for good. According to a Gartner study, the number one priority for HR leaders in 2025 is leader and manager development. No shock there. But let's look at the data more deeply. How many organizations with leadership development programs think they work, that they actually help prepare their leaders for the future? Only 36%. And how many HR leaders are confident in their emerging future leaders? Only 23%. So organizations are spending money and prioritizing leadership development, but they aren't seeing the results. In fact, 71% of HR leaders said they don't think their organization is effective at developing their mid-level leaders. And this is a huge problem. When we spend money and invest in leadership development, we want it to work. We want people to be confident and capable in their roles. And it seems like we just aren't seeing those results. So what's missing? What should we really be focused on? I've asked new manager expert Girard to join me today. Eric helps new managers transform from high-performing individual contributors, the ones we always promote, to great people managers. He's worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, and he's seen a lot. And I can't wait to hear what he has to share today. 2 skills your people managers need, but probably don't have. Let's dive in. It's learning for good. Eric is a highly accomplished management development professional, author, and podcast host. As the CEO of Girard Training Solutions, he has more than 30 years of experience helping improve the performance of managers and employees, where he's become known for his high-energy, engaging facilitation style. His specific focus is on helping new managers transition successfully to their new roles, guiding them to make their teams as effective as possible, and teaching the skills that help managers maintain high team engagement. Eric's unique experience includes designing, developing, and delivering leadership, management, and employee training for Apple, Nutanix, Applied Materials, Symantec, and Veritas. He founded Girard Training Solutions in 2007 and has designed and delivered training for dozens of clients globally in high-tech, academia, advertising, healthcare, and education. He has successfully delivered training and improved performance in 16 countries, including throughout the United States. Eric is also the host of the Management Development Unlocked podcast and author of Lead Like a Pro, the Essential Guide for New Managers. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm excited to have you because who better to talk about new people managers? I am really curious how you landed on this audience in particular. I'm sure we'll get there today, but we are seeing so many organizations prioritize leadership development, prioritize the development of their people managers. We've seen it over the past several years. We're seeing it going into 2025. And so I can't wait to hear from you and your experience, what it is that people really need as they head into their people manager roles.
I am at your service. Happy to be here.
So before we jump in, I always like to have a little bit of background. I think it's so interesting to hear how people get to where they are. So tell us a little bit about your career journey.
I started in learning and development right out of college. So that would have been 1992 when I discovered the Association for Talent Development, which back then was the American Society for Training and Development. So I started with a student chapter in Sacramento, California, and immediately went to work in San Francisco teaching people how to use their computers. So this is back when DOS was still a thing and people were transitioning from WordPerfect for DOS over to Word for Windows and Word for Mac. So that's where I get started. And then I went to graduate school and got a degree in intercultural training. And along the way, wound up living and working in Australia for a couple of years. And finally wound up in Silicon Valley in late 1999 at Veritas. Started out doing new hire onboarding, new hire training, then moved into employee development, and then hit my stride with management development. And so I've been focused on management development for the whole 20-year span that I was in Silicon Valley. And I feel like that is an underserved population. New managers are an underserved population. And the benefit of investing in that group of folks is huge. And I just love seeing folks' eyes light up when they're like, oh, you mean I can say this or do this and get better results with my teams? Oh, I can't wait to go try that. I absolutely love that.
It's so fun when we actually get to see the impact that we're having. And I can tell just in the tone of your voice and how your speed is changing and things like that, that this really is something that you care deeply about. So you mentioned what's an underserved population, which is so true. I've seen it in so many different organizations. People get promoted because they're good at their job, not necessarily because they're ready to be a people manager. Why is it that you focus so much on this particular group?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. The first is I've been on the receiving end of untrained managers. So I have been an employee working for someone who was promoted because they were great at fill in the blank, great at instructional design, great at facilitation, what have you. And so then they become the leader of the group. And without any training, they created train wrecks. So that was no fun. Then, in a twist of irony, when it was my turn to get promoted, I hadn't received any training and I made all the same mistakes. I didn't set goals. I didn't delegate. I didn't provide coaching. I did provide feedback, but it was so nitpicky and granular and cringy that it makes me shudder to think of it now. So I made all the same mistakes and I walked away from that experience thinking, okay, never again. If it's not on my watch, this is never going to happen to anybody else again. And so when I came to Washington in 2020, I decided to hang out my own shingle and make it my life's work to help this group of new managers make that transition successfully so that they don't create misery on their teams and so that they create value for the business right from the very first day.
So we're going to say no to train wrecks. I think that's a great idea. And I love that you're supporting this particular group. Where do you see people managers struggle the most?
I think it starts with making the mental transition into their new job. So on Monday, you were an individual contributor. You were a podcast host and you were happy doing that. Then on Tuesday, you get promoted and now you're leading a team of podcast hosts. And it's no longer about you being a good podcast host. It's about you setting direction for that team, setting strategy, taking care of analytics and data and so on. But because you weren't trained, you fall back into what you know, which is being a great podcast host. That happens over and over again with financial analysts, with engineers, you name it. They fall backward into what they know and they go back to their comfort zone, which means that the team often gets ignored and the team does not achieve business results. And that causes real problems for the organization because the team is foundering, they're not delivering what's needed because the manager is just acting like a superstar employee rather than a leader of the team.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think generally, right, anytime you think about a behavior change or anything that you want to change, it's easy as soon as it feels different or uncomfortable or hard, it's easy to slide back into what you did before. And that's why we see so many New Year's resolutions fail and things like that. So it makes sense that the same thing would happen when you're going into a new role that's using a completely different skill set. It becomes uncomfortable or unclear. And so you do start to slide back into what you've always done, which doesn't work when you're in a new role. So, how do you recommend organizations invest in their people managers?
The very first thing I would say is that organizations need to talk to folks who are being groomed or considered for management positions. And they need to be thinking about, okay, first off, how can we instill the value of empathy in these people? It's not that we all need to become Brene Brown. We don't need to become the most empathetic human being. But can we improve our empathy skills 10%? Okay. Not to allow bad behavior to run rampant, but just when I'm talking with you about a performance problem or when you come to me with a problem, can I listen deeply? Can I really understand where you're at? And then can I help out to the best of my ability and then help you get help through the employee assistance program or what have you so that you continue to perform? But empathy, I think, is the number one thing that all new managers need to build. And again, they don't need to become a superstar empathetic person, but just a little bit more empathetic. Then folks need to make that mental transition. They need to understand what it means to be a manager and no longer be the superstar employee they were yesterday. And then we need to get into what I call blocking and tackling. So this means things like learning how to set goals, how to delegate, how to coach, how to provide feedback, how to manage change, how to reward and recognize. These are all things that managers need to learn how to do that are not intuitive. It's all easily learned, but if I just throw a new manager in the deep end, they're not going to intuitively grok that and understand that. So they do need to be taught.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we see when organizations are investing in people managers, we tend to see maybe a one-off training or sometimes even a full leadership development program, people manager program. But sometimes it is more just, hey, go to LinkedIn Learning or whatever we have available to us and see what you can find. And that isn't always the best approach. I have lots of feelings about that. I think LinkedIn Learning is a great resource, but it's often not contextualized. It's not personalized. It's hard to know what to actually complete. And then when you complete it, how to actually implement it. So while I do think there's value there, it can be a little bit difficult, I think, to implement it in a really well thought out way. So if an organization is looking at investing in their people managers and they're wanting to help them make this mental transition, they're wanting to instill the value of empathy, they're wanting to teach them how to do those things like set goals and give feedback, do you have a particular recommendation about what that should look like?
Well, there's a couple of things. The first thing you can do, the kind of low-hanging fruit, is you can offer folks books, okay, and online learning, all right? So for example, I've written a book, as you mentioned in the intro. That is a great place to start. I think that what's going to be most effective, though, is running in-person, not virtual, in-person programs where folks get a chance to learn these concepts and then try them out in a lab. It does work via Zoom, for example, but being in the room with a cohort of 30 people or less and actually trying these skills out in a lab environment is a fantastic way to embed those behaviors so that then you can go do them on the job. It's possible to do it via Zoom. I teach via Zoom all the time. I think the impact is a little bit less just because you don't get the full impact of being in the presence of somebody else, seeing all of their nonverbal behaviors and so on. So I would say set up labs, bring your managers together, get them together in groups of, I would say, 30 or less, and run them through the key skills.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there's so much value in even just the relationships that you're building when you bring people together. not always a direct objective that you are building into your learning experience, but the relationships that they're able to build, they go with them back into the workplace. And so they're going to benefit them in the long run when they run into a challenge or anything like that. As a new people manager, they have a whole group of new people managers that they can reach back out to for advice or just to be encouraged. So I think there's always a lot of value in bringing people together. So if a nonprofit can only focus on 2 skills, maybe they're limited in what they have capacity to do, which 2 would you recommend? You named several as you were talking initially about where you see people struggle and what you think organizations should invest in. If they can only do 2, what would those be?
Oh, you're killing me. Only 2, really? The first thing I would do is go back to the executive sponsor and plead for more resources because 2 is not enough.
That's fair.
All right. So given that the pleading is done and we're stuck with 2, I would say the transitioning piece is very important, helping people understand what it means to be a manager and how you must transition from being the superstar employee to being an outstanding people manager. And then I would say delegation is a very important skill. And it's one of the things that I did not do when I was a first-time manager. I held on to everything. And so I quickly wound up overwhelmed and just buried underneath all the tasks. And in the meantime, my team was like, you want us to do anything? And I was, no, I got it. And it was not helpful. So I would say making that transition is the first thing that new managers need to learn. And then learning how to delegate well is super important. But there's so much more. So I would be in my CHRO's office begging for more resources.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I like to challenge people and because sometimes we are, as L&D, we are up against challenging situations where we may have a decision maker who isn't ready to invest, or we might have a subject matter expert who feels strongly in one direction that isn't necessarily aligned with what you heard when you did needs analysis, or we may have a team of 1. And so what can we do with our limited resources? So I do like to challenge people when we talk about what can a nonprofit do and really think about 1 to 2 things that they can go implement right away. But now that I've forced you and challenged you with that question, is there anything else you would like to leave with our nonprofit listeners?
I think that everybody deserves great coaching. And so I would really encourage every new manager to study coaching, not necessarily to become a certified coach, but for example, Michael Bungay-Stanier wrote a seminal book called The Coaching Habit. And in it, he outlines 7 questions that you can ask during a coaching situation to really draw out the other person so that they come to the solution rather than you giving advice. And so one of the things he talks about that I just love is that you have to tame the advice monster. You don't want to just give advice and pontificate. You need the other person to own it by coming up with their own solution. So I would say study coaching, practice coaching, learn how to be a great coach, and that will help you a lot in your journey.
Great advice and great book recommendation. Eric, thank you for joining me today.
It was my pleasure. Anytime.
Our people managers need our support. We see them struggle. We know they need new skills and a new mindset as they make this transition from individual contributor to people manager. So I love that Eric talked about both that mental transition and the skills. And I'll be honest, this barely scratches the surface of everything Eric has to offer to new managers. Check out his book and podcast, as well as The Coaching Habit, which he mentioned, and start creating your plan for people manager development in 2025. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.